What if I told you that one of the most pivotal moments of the 20th century, the event that signaled the end of the Cold War, happened because of a mistake? Not a grand political strategy, not a military victory, but a simple, almost comical, bureaucratic blunder. This is the incredible true story of how a misspoken sentence brought down the Berlin Wall. For nearly 30 years, the Berlin Wall was more than just concrete and barbed wire. It was the starkest symbol of a world divided. The Iron Curtain made tangible. It split a city, tore families apart, and served as a constant, grim reminder of the standoff between East and West, communism and capitalism. For the people of East Berlin, it was a prison wall, a barrier that prevented them from seeking freedom, opportunity, or simply reuniting with loved ones just a few hundred meters away. The stories from this era are heartbreaking. People tried to escape by any means necessary, digging tunnels, hiding in cars, even attempting to fly over it in homemade hot air balloons. Many succeeded, but many more were caught, imprisoned, or tragically lost their lives at the hands of border guards. The wall wasn't just a political line. It was a scar on the heart of a nation and a source of daily anguish for millions. By the late 1980s, the winds of change were blowing across Eastern Europe. In Moscow, Mikhail Gorbachev's policies of glasnost or openness and perestroika, or restructuring, were sending ripples throughout the Soviet bloc. He signaled that the Soviet Union would no longer use military force to prop up communist regimes in its satellite states. This was a monumental shift. In Poland, the Solidarity movement was gaining unstoppable momentum. In Hungary, the government had already begun dismantling its border fence with Austria, creating a small but significant crack in the Iron Curtain. East Germany, or the GDR, was feeling the pressure. Its economy was crumbling, and public discontent was reaching a boiling point. Huge demonstrations, known as the Monday demonstrations, were happening in cities like Leipzig, with hundreds of thousands of people chanting, "Wir sind das Volk," "We are the people." The East German government was in a state of crisis. Erich Honecker, the country's hardline leader, was forced to resign, and his replacement, Egon Krenz, was scrambling to find a way to appease the population without surrendering control. The regime was desperate. They knew they had to offer some kind of concession, some release valve for the immense public pressure. Their solution, a new travel law. The plan was to announce a policy that would allow East Germans to apply for visas to travel abroad. It was meant to be a controlled, orderly process. The announcement was scheduled for the next day, November 10th, to give border guards and officials time to prepare for the new procedures. The new regulations were hastily drafted and handed to a mid-level party official named Günter Schabowski, who was about to hold a routine, and usually quite boring, live press conference. Crucially, Schabowski had been in the meetings where the policy was decided, and had only just received the notes before walking out in front of the cameras. He hadn't had time to read them properly, and so, on the evening of November 9th, 1989, Schabowski began his press conference. For about an hour, he droned on about party matters, and the international journalists in the room were growing restless. Then, near the end, a reporter asked a question about the new travel regulations. Schabowski, a bit flustered, shuffled through his papers. He found the note about the new policy and began to read it aloud. He announced that East Germans would be permitted to cross the border. This was stunning, but the key detail was missing. When would this take effect? Another journalist, sensing the historic gravity of the moment, shouted the question, "When does it come into force?" Schabowski, looking confused, glanced down at his notes again. He scanned the paper, but there was no date written on it. He shrugged and uttered the words that would change the world, as far as I know. It takes effect immediately, without delay. Chaos. The journalists in the room were in disbelief. They rushed to their phones to file the story. The wall is open. News flashes spread like wildfire across West German television and radio, which many East Berliners could receive. In homes across East Berlin, people heard the news. Could it be true? After 28 years, was it really possible to just walk through? Tentatively at first, then in a growing stream, people began to leave their homes and head towards the nearest border crossings. At the checkpoints, the border guards were completely bewildered. They had received no new orders. Their instructions were the same as always, to stop anyone from crossing. But now, they were faced with a crowd that was growing larger and more insistent by the minute. The first small groups turned into hundreds, then thousands. The atmosphere was incredibly tense. The guards were armed. A single order to open fire could have led to a massacre. But the crowds weren't aggressive. They were hopeful, chanting, "Open the gate! Open the gate!" The guards made frantic calls to their superiors, but no one knew what to do. The government had seemingly gone silent, paralyzed by the events they had accidentally set in motion. The chain of command had broken down. At the Bornholmer Strasse checkpoint, the commanding officer, Harold Jaeger, was under immense pressure. His checkpoint was mobbed. He feared a stampede, a crush that could kill people. With no orders from above, and facing a monumental human crisis, he made a decision on his own. At around 11:30 p.m., he gave the order, "Open the barrier." The moment the gates swung open, it was like a dam breaking. People surged through, some crying, some laughing, some in a state of shock. They were met on the other side by West Berliners, who had gathered to see what was happening. Strangers embraced. Families who had been separated for decades were reunited in tearful hugs. People climbed onto the wall itself, chipping away at it with hammers and chisels, dancing and celebrating on top of the very symbol of their oppression. The sound of champagne corks popping mixed with the chants of Torov, "Open the gate." It was a spontaneous, joyous, and overwhelming party that lasted all night. The global reaction was a mixture of astonishment and cautious optimism. In Washington, President George H.W. Bush was careful not to gloat, wanting to allow the events to unfold without provoking a hardline Soviet response. In London, Margaret Thatcher expressed concern about the speed of German reunification. But for Gorbachev in Moscow, it was the validation of his new policy. He had let the dominoes fall, and there was no going back. The fall of the Berlin Wall was the symbolic death knell of the Soviet Empire in Eastern Europe. In the days and weeks that followed, the wall was systematically dismantled, its pieces becoming souvenirs of a bygone era. This single night, triggered by a poorly briefed official, set in motion the rapid reunification of Germany, which officially took place less than a year later. In October 1990, it marked the definitive end of the Cold War, a conflict that had held the world in its grip for over 4 decades. The story of the fall of the Berlin Wall is a powerful reminder that history is not always made by grand plans and powerful leaders. Sometimes, it's shaped by accident, by confusion, and by the overwhelming, unstoppable desire of ordinary people for freedom. It's a testament to the fact that even the most imposing structures of tyranny can crumble in an instant when people decide they've had enough. A mistaken sentence didn't just open a gate. It opened up a new future for Germany, for Europe, and for the entire world. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into one of history's most incredible moments. If you found this story as fascinating as we do, please hit that like button and subscribe to Historical Figures and Moments for more stories like this one. Don't forget to ring the bell so you never miss an update. We'll see you in the next video.